In class 10, apparently, I had written in my journal that my two ideal dream jobs in the future would be Google and Facebook. Eventually, I ended up joining Facebook, completely having forgotten that I wrote that. Achievement of pride was at Google, I was just responsible for creating the entire cricket product, which is everything on search, everything on the feed, notifications. We grew that product by 10x during my entire tenure.
A big inflection point in your career came when you joined Glean when there were less than 10 employees. You left when there were around 300 employees, and the trajectory went from pre-product to I think $2 or $3 billion in valuation. How Glean happened for you?
The first 2 years of my time at Glean were maybe the best 2 years I've ever had in my career. It's almost like working on a school project where everyone only cares about the success of the project, and now Glean is a $7 billion business.
What are you most excited about at Menlo when you're investing through Menlo?
I've only seen one startup journey. What if I could see 10 startup journeys? That sounded really fun for me. It's like, being on an episode of Shark Tank, but that's your entire life. One of the things that I think India has a lot of growing up to do in as a country, India does not contribute to global research in any significant way as a country.
What are you most excited about Indian technology ecosystem?
India has maybe the widest set of talent to provide data that is both basic data and pretty advanced data in various fields. India has the best supply of talent, and it's much less costly than in America. And I think that's where our leverage as a nation lies internationally.
My guest today is Deedy, an engineer turned investor who's had an extraordinary journey from Calcutta to Silicon Valley. He's worked at Facebook, built Google's cricket product used by millions, and joined Glean when it was just 3 people, helping it grow into a $7 billion company. Today at Menlo Ventures, he's backing the next wave of AI founders. This is a conversation about ambition, risk-taking, the rise of AI, and what's next for India's tech scene. Let's dive in. Deedy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Appreciate it.
I'm so glad to be here, Shiva. Thanks for inviting me.
What an incredible journey you've had so far, from Facebook to Google to Glean, and now at Menlo Park. And when you talk about things on social media, people pay attention to it. You get millions of views. But before that, Deedy, maybe a good starting point can be, we are really a byproduct of our environment. What really shaped you the most while growing up in India?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think if I were to say the few things that shaped me the most about India, growing up, I grew up in Calcutta, and I was born in India, and my family moved to the Bay Area when I was 3. We stayed here for 7 years, and then I moved back to India when I was 10, and sort of did from class 5 to class 12. I was in India, then I came back to America for college. I think when I moved back to India I think my time in America and my time in India taught me slightly different things. Even though I was very young in America, I think the most formative memory that I have is my teachers in America would always tell me, you should never trust the book. You should never trust when someone tells you something. You have to think about it for yourself. Otherwise, it's just their opinion and it's something they've read. And I think that I didn't realize at the time, but that had a lasting impact on me. And then when I came back to India, there's maybe 2 big things I can think of that had a really big impact on me. One, I would say, is just, the sheer amount of competition and in India teaches you that it's just not good enough to be average. You really have to work hard in order to be exceptional if you want to do anything exceptional. And so for the last 4 years of my high school, I was, doing IIT coaching. I eventually ended up, taking the SAT. I did my IIT exam. I did okay, not fantastic. But it taught me a lot about like how much hard work is required to get the results you want. And frankly, I still tell people to this day, like, I think my hardest academic challenges were in India, not anywhere else. I went to Cornell later, and that was a breeze compared to how hard India was. So that was one. And I think the second thing that I think about a lot is, even though I would say I went to a, somewhat fancy private school in India, most of my best friends, especially the ones who lived around me, were not from, very privileged backgrounds at all. They were extremely different from where I was. I mean, most of them didn't even speak English that well. We spoke in Hindi. And I just became such good friends with them, and I really realized just the fortune that I have, and really internalized that, when you are given the gift of like small things, like you have enough money to go to a good school, your parents are willing to support your education, these small things that we often take for granted. It is, in my mind, it was always my philosophy, it is your duty to take advantage of that, and you just can't slack off, because not everybody gets that opportunity. And I saw that very closely up front, and I saw how painful it is when you aren't given that opportunity, and that's always been something that's driven me for a very long time. So I would say those are the one or two, three things that have had the biggest lasting impact on how I think about things and how I do things, even now.
You mentioned you took SAT and you also studied for IIT. What was the reason behind moving to US? What was the journey like?
Well, two separate questions. The reason and the journey. So I'll talk about the reason first. Um, my parents were actually extremely, middle class, at least in mindset. They did not want me to go to America. I mean, that's why they put me in IIT coaching for 4 years. It's not like I wanted to do that. I was too young. They wanted me to go to IIT in India and then maybe, go later for my master's, as do, I imagine most parents or many parents in India do. What I began to realize in about class 10, I was always somebody who thought a lot about the future. I realize not everyone does, but I was always wondering, I'm like, well, iske baad kya hoga? Well, what happens after like college? What happens after I get a job? What does my life actually look like? And the more I thought about it, I was like, I don't really want to go to IIT. There's a couple of reasons. Number one is, besides being able to tell people that you are very smart in India, I didn't think the college was particularly good. I mean, you were around a lot of smart people, but when you talk about a good university, the things I was thinking of is like, I want to do research. I want to do research with robots. I want to like be in places where I have access to the best researchers in the world. I want to take classes that I want to take, and extremely advanced ones. None of those things were actually available in IIT. And that's really when I started considering, I'm like, well, where do the other smart, interesting technologists in the world, what would they have done? And then when I started learning more and more about US colleges, I was like, well, this sounds spectacular. There's a lot of independence. You can be almost as smart or as dumb as you want to be in these colleges. And that's when I got thinking about it. It was a painful battle, fast forward 2 years from class 10 to class 12, to really convince my dad that this was a good idea. And he eventually said, look, if you can get into IIT, then I will send you abroad. And so eventually what happened was I did get into college abroad, and eventually then got into IIT. I didn't get a very good rank, and I got into IIT, and then I decided, look, I'm going to go abroad. And my dream university, for a variety of reasons, was always to go to Cornell for some reason. My dad had no idea what that was. As very typical Indian dad fashion, he said, look, I've heard of Harvard, I've heard of Stanford, I've heard of MIT. What is Cornell? I've never heard of that. And so it was hard to convince him, but eventually, I landed up at Cornell.
Got it. And where did the interest of getting into research came to you?
I was always somebody who was thinking about, what do I want to do in life? And the more I thought about it, the way I would think about it is I would look at people who, we were in the era of the internet. So I would look at people's trajectories, and it's something to this day, if you look at my tweets, something I care a lot about, and try to understand, like, okay, what are the paths people take, and what is interesting and what is not. And when I think about science, and I think about advancing science and doing cutting edge research that actually moves the needle in terms of what is the best technology, who builds the best technology companies. If you look at, like, I would always look at who built Google and what were they doing. And Sergey and Larry were both doing a PhD in search and computer science at Stanford. And so it was always fascinating to me to be like, well, these are the people who invent the textbook that everybody else learns. So I was very drawn to the idea of like, yeah, of course I want to know what robots can do. Of course I want to know what search algorithms can do. I want to know all of these things. And that's kind of my my gravitation towards research. Just inherently, I know some people think very differently, but I was never, which is ironic to say now, but I never really thought that hard about the money aspect of things. I figured that if you did the cutting edge research, even if the money wasn't great, the lifestyle was amazing. And that's how I got into it.
Got it. And Didi, post Cornell, you ended up joining Facebook. Maybe talk a bit about Facebook journey, and then we'll dig deeper into Google. What are a few things that you worked on over there that makes you, smile today also, and makes you proud about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was graduating college, to be honest, I had broadly three directions to really choose from. I happened to be at some point, I got very methodical about how I did interviews. And so I had a bunch of jobs open to me, a sidetrack. This was yet another reason that I didn't like IIT, where even the placements and how they work there is just very different and terrible. In America, you can just interview as many companies as you want and then pick your best offer at the end, which is just not something they even let you do at IIT. But anyway, I had basically three tracks. One was big tech, and one was just join a startup, and the third one was to go into high frequency trading or quant trading. And in my mind, I thought, well, quant trading was only about money, and there were some interesting problems, but I didn't really feel drawn to what I was doing. I mean, it was just mostly about how much money you can make. Startups were interesting, but I thought I didn't have enough judgment to value whether a startup was good or not at the time. And I thought it would honestly, have some visa implications, which I was wrong, but I thought at the time it would be harder for a bunch of visa reasons. And then I had big tech. And, the really funny story is I looked back at some point at a diary. I used to write journal articles, and in class 10, apparently I had written in my journal, I completely forgot about this, that my two ideal dream jobs in the future would be Google and Facebook. Eventually I ended up joining Facebook, completely having forgotten that I wrote that. And really the reason I picked Facebook at the time was, quite simple. It was one of the best companies in tech at the time. Two, they were willing to give me an offer in New York, and I really wanted to be in New York. And three, because, they paid pretty well at the time. So it was objectively like these three reasons. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I was only there for about a year. And frankly, it was because I didn't particularly like the way that Facebook did engineering. A lot of their engineering culture is focused on like, hey, let's run a bunch of experiments and see which one can move the number up the most, and let's launch that product. And I didn't think they had a lot of very serious thought on how to develop product. In many ways, Facebook has created very few products of value internally. Most of their most valuable products have come through an acquisition. And they were very, they made a money-making machine, which is why they pay so well and why the company is able to expand and grow so much. But at its core, I didn't think the actual engineering I was doing on a day-to-day basis was that fun or useful. It was working on like tangential things to the core business and product. So I decided, okay, let me try something else. And it was always my dream to work at Google, and particularly work on search. Search was a problem that's fascinated me ever since I was in high school, because it's a problem that kind of encapsulates all the different interesting parts of computer science, from data structures, distributed systems, natural language processing, machine learning, information retrieval. There's a lot of things that go on to make a good search engine. It's not just like, hey, like, let me open this app and click on a button and it'll do some things. It's a lot more complex than that. So Google search is very selective with who they hire. So they didn't hire me out of college for that team. They hired me to a different team. And when I came from Facebook, they were very happy to let me in. They were very happy to give me a good job. I spent about 4 years there. First in New York, and then I spent some time in Tel Aviv in Israel, and then I eventually ended up starting a search team in Bangalore at Google Bangalore. And if I were to say the single biggest achievement of pride was, I am a big sports fan and my favorite sport is cricket. And at Google, I was just responsible for creating the entire cricket product, which is everything on search, everything on the feed, notifications. And we, grew that product by around 10x during my entire tenure into something that was actually usable for cricket fans, not just some basic scores that they were showing prior to that. And so I was quite proud of both. That was very good for the business of Google, but also I was just mostly proud because I could use this product that I built and I loved it, and it was on the Google page and everyone could see it. And so that was kind of my favorite thing that I did at Google.
Yeah. And you love playing cricket, I believe.
Yes,
So
I do.
you got to really work on fun stuff, or stuff, something that you would do it for free also. Didi, seems like a big inflection point in your career came when Glean happened. I think you joined Glean when there were less than 10 employees. You left when they were around 300 employees, and the trajectory went from pre-product to, I think, $2 or $3 billion in valuation. Maybe talk us through why, how Glean happened for you, and what were the biggest learnings for you and the impact that you created there.
Yeah, until that point in my career, I was, someone who was fairly risk averse, and I think many people can relate to that. You know how it is like in Indian culture. Like if you have a job at Google, all the aunties and uncles and your parents are like, beta iske alawa kya hi karna? Like what else would you want to do besides this? This is kind of like the crowning achievement for everybody. And yet I didn't feel like this was even close to touching potential of actually creating something new. Big companies have a lot of red tape. You have to move very slowly. And as you get up the ranks, I was at this inflection point at Google where I realized most of my job was going to be basically, quote unquote, stakeholder management. It's a lot of telling the higher ups what you're doing, telling the people below you what to do, and you're not even doing much. You're just kind of a middle manager. And I'm like, this pays well, but I don't see myself doing this for a long period of time. This is not a useful job. So I was thinking about what can I do? I talked to, all the bigger name startups and wasn't really feeling the energy there. I thought, they'll sell you on something, but I don't think that would have changed the equation. Largely, I would have been doing the same thing. And then eventually I talked to about 25 to 30 seed stage companies or very early stage companies. And it was difficult at the time because every single company I spoke to, I thought was, pretty bad. I thought, why should I work for you? You barely know what you figured out. And you don't really have any talent. I also thought many of them didn't have the talent themselves. So it wasn't convincing until I met Arvind. And I was introduced to Arvind through, Arvind was the founder of Glean, and he was the first person to start the Google Bangalore office. And a bit of lore about Arvind. Arvind was, rank 6 in the JE back in his day. He was a very early employee at Google, where he quickly became one of the first distinguished engineers there. And I still remember he said, my title, I was reporting to Larry Page, and my title was head of speed at Google. And I asked him, I'm like, head of speed for what? And he say, no, head of speed for everything. And I'm like, okay, wow, that's a pretty impressive title to have. And he did that. And then he started a company called Rubrik, which is one of the few IPO'd companies in the past 4 years, $10 billion plus company. And then he was starting Glean. And so immediately when I talked to him, it wasn't just about his resume, but it was very clear, this was a man who would never struggle to fundraise. He would never struggle to hire anybody. And he had a lot of clarity in how this business works. And we really gelled on the fact that I had a lot of opinions and interest in search, and this was enterprise search, which was slightly different and like actually very different in many ways from a computer science perspective. And we talked about that at length. And it was initially not supposed to be an interview. It was just a conversation. And he was like, I really like you. You should join. And at that point, the team was just, him and two other people. There was no product. There was no code. It was just getting off the ground. Spent a lot of time thinking about like, hey, what was I going to get into? I'm going from this like great career trajectory at a company that everybody knows to basically nothing. And I thought about it and I thought, worst case, this is 2 years down the drain and I'll come back and do something else, but I'll work with smart people and I think I'll have a fun journey. And so I joined, and let me tell you that the first 2 years of my time at Glean were maybe the best 2 years I've ever had in my career, just from a satisfaction perspective. It's very, it's almost like working on a school project where everyone only cares about the success of the project, not the success of the team members. And except you're not in school, you are people who are very competent, who have been working for a very long period of time. And it was it was a high performance environment. It wasn't really your typical, it wasn't a startup grind. Like we didn't feel like we had to be at the office 12 hours a day or had to work the weekends, but we wanted to. And so we would. And if you didn't want to, you didn't have to. So the culture was actually really, really fun. And that's when the business sort of found its footing. And over time, the business grew, everything went well. We had our funding. And now Glean is a $7 billion business and it's doing quite well. So I think everything after that went very well.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And, Deedy, post Glean, you decided to get on the other side of the world, which is investing, and you joined Menlo Ventures. Why getting into venture capital where you were, getting to do your life's work, you were enjoying, and you were learning a lot? Walk us through that, and also. What are you most excited about at Menlo when you're investing through Menlo?
Yeah. Look, I think I get asked this question a lot, and I think it's an interesting one because, this is, I think, one of the most obvious answers. But I guess it's hard from the outside to see. When a company grows and it's doing well, you don't really I didn't really have as much fun once the company started becoming bigger. It's really difficult. The job is very different. When you're starting a company, it's very creative. You're building things, you're ideating, you're finding product market fit. You're trying to see what works. You're trying to make sure the thing has any value. You're selling it. You're figuring out hiring. It's very exciting. Once things start to work and you've been there from the very beginning, it becomes a lot more boring. And so the last thing I did at Glean was I stepped down from my like managerial position. I thought, look, LLMs are a thing. I started the AI product line at Glean, first built it out and then had a product there. Once that business grew and took off the ground, it just became a lot less interesting. Like it was working. I didn't have to do anything anymore. The business was working. Somebody just had to run the business. And I could have done it, but running a business is far less exciting and you learn much less than when you build it from the ground up. And I thought, look, other people can do that. And honestly, from a financial perspective, your equity vests. So it's not like I was losing much. I was losing incremental, smaller equity grants, but I already had my equity grant. So I thought, look, I want to try a different challenge. And for me, the first thing I was looking to do was start my own company. When I was looking to start my own company, I ended up talking to a bunch of venture capital firms around the valley, just to see what their thoughts were. Like, what are you seeing in the market? What's working? What's not working? Where do you think there's opportunity? Just sort of battle testing the sort of ideas that I was playing with. And as I was doing this, a bunch of firms would tell me, they were like, you'd actually be a great fit for this job. And at the time, I never wanted to be in venture capital. So I would ask them like, okay, but I don't know anything about this job. And one thing led to the other. The more I read, the more interesting it sounded to me. And it's not like I knew nothing about business of startups because I've been at Glean. And I thought, look, what better way to spend time than I've only seen one startup journey. What if I could see 10 startup journeys? And that sounds like the most fun job in the world. I get to talk about technology. I get to talk about products and business, and I get to figure out who to invest in and constantly keep tabs on the market. That sounded really fun for me. And I decided to take that plunge. Didn't really know what I was getting into. To be honest with you, it could have gone many different ways. But now I've been doing it for about a year and a half, and I can safely say it's after that first 2 years at Glean, I think it's probably the best job I've ever had. It's such an exciting job if you are a kind of person who likes to work pretty nonstop, but likes to like constantly context switch between interesting ideas and talk to some really smart people who are absolutely on the cutting edge of what they do. There's no 2 days that are the same, and it is just an incredible experience to wake up every morning and be like, what are the ideas that I can see today? In many ways, it's like, being on an episode of Shark Tank, but that's your entire life. And so I quite like it. It's a good job.
Yeah, happy for you, Deedy. And what are the few things that you're looking at Melno, and what kind of opportunities you're looking to invest in?
Well, there's a variety. So I think the main matrix I would use is on one axis, I would put stage, and the other axis, I would put type of company. For any venture scale business, you are looking for that business to go from no revenue business to at least $100 million or $1 billion revenue, recurring revenue, ideally business in about a 7 to 10 year time span. That's the basic criteria for anything that's what we call venture backable. There's many reasons for that. I can get into it, but that's a venture backable business. Now, in that category, you can invest in multiple stages, and there's multiple categories of ideas that generally fit that bucket. I tend to invest primarily in seed and series A and occasionally series B. And our firm also goes up to C and sometimes D's. So we're a multi-stage firm. We're a $1.5 billion fund. And so every about 3 years, we'll raise that kind of money and go deploy it over 3 years to different startups. The other category is spaces, and spaces or domains could be everything from, crypto, fintech, consumer, enterprise SaaS, AI, infra. For me, my specialty, because of my background at Glean, is enterprise SaaS, AI, and infra. And so those are the kind of categories that I look into and that I would invest in.
Mm-hmm.
That in the seed and series A stage. But, last thing I'll say is, in addition to that, I also help run the anthology fund at Menlo, which is our $100 million fund with Anthropic, which is the big AI lab. And so from that fund, we also do what we call like out of territory investments. So they can often be, smaller check sizes, but in earlier stage founders, pre-seed rounds, some seed rounds at different kinds of stages. And that's a little bit of a different focus from our core fund structure.
Got it. Let's talk a bit about AI these days, Deedy. I know, what are a few tools that you've been using professionally, personally, few tools that you can't live your life without anymore?
I can name them all. I mean, I use ChatGPT all the time. I use Anthropic for Claude Code. Claude Code is my favorite thing. I almost use it like an intern. I just tell it to do things. It remembers things about me, join these 2 videos together, do research on this person, pretty much everything. I use this tool called Whisperflow all the time for voice dictation. I've slowly but surely realized that I can type not that fast, but I can speak quite fast, and I can get way more email and way more stuff done if I'm talking to it. I use Granola for my meetings and my meeting notes. I often try to generate images with a variety of things, whether it's like Midjourney or Flux or what have you. There is I use like some audio stuff when I'm doing some special things, so I would use 11 Labs or Cartesia or something like that. So there's just a plethora of things, and I'm probably not even naming a few. I've played with Lovable. I don't really use it all that much anymore. So yeah, there's just a bunch of interesting AI stuff that I like to play with, and I'm also always testing like 3 or 4 new tools every week, and just learning like what is the cutting edge of things that's out there.
Yeah. Could be hard to answer, but Didi, was there a moment where you were using one of these tools and that made you just think, wow, like that's insane? Maybe it saved you, let's say, hours or maybe days or weeks to do something that you used to do earlier.
I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, I think every day I have that experience one way or the other. It's just incredible. I mean, I'll give you maybe an example. A lot of people will ask me, how do you keep up to date with your news? And the way I keep up to date with my news is I've just built with Claude Code this agent that just grows and crawls everything I would have gone and looked at, and then just summarizes all the top news articles with every single citation, from whether it's Hacker News, whether it's Tech Meme, whether it's like some other different Reddit threads that I look at. Pretty much everything, it'll just constantly tell me what to look at. And that I find incredible, that I didn't have to code any of that. I use it. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, the whisper flow thing I think is insane, that I can just talk so fast. There's a company that makes what they call diffusion models for code, where I used to think coding models are pretty impressive, but with diffusion models and whisper, there's this demo that I can show you where I hold down my function key on my Mac and I say, build me Minesweeper. And it takes 2 seconds and the entire thing is built from scratch. And I can hold it down again and say, actually make it larger. And it will, like, barely before I'm finished saying that sentence, it'll change the code and make it larger. And those are kind of mind-boggling experiences for me, having grown up loving tech and seeing what tech can do. I never thought that would be possible. So I think it's just phenomenal. I mean, every time I want to learn about something, I'm probably using ChatGPT or Claude. Every time I want to visualize some data, which was my favorite thing to do on the side, I would have to spend hours on a project, for a data visualization project. Now I just throw it into Claude and I say, like, hey, graph this. Like, for example, the other day, so I know I'm going long, but the other day I was trying to assemble this list of salaries for engineers in startups, and it was tedious. Like, I was getting it from a variety of sources, and the way it was shown is I had to take screenshots of maybe 10 different pages, and that would have taken me like many, many hours to organize from those screenshots, and you couldn't really copy paste it because of the nature of how it was. So I took those 8 screenshots, I put it into Claude Code, and I said, go read it, and then give me the final visualization in HTML. And it just did it. It took it from 8 different screenshots, it structured it absolutely perfectly, it gave me a stunning visualization, I just took a screenshot and I had to share it. And that's a project that would have taken at least a week, and it took me, 15 minutes.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And Didi, look, as we can tell, you've been very methodical around, building your career. And a lot of smart people have mentioned that eventually 90% of the jobs, we can call it 80, 90, 70, whatever that number is, will be done by AI. If you were to kind of like, think around, reinvent yourself or give advice to others, what are few skills that you'll focus on, which will always stay irreplaceable?
So In my understanding, and look, I could be wrong. It's very hard to predict the future when it comes to what the capabilities of AI can be. Like, I would have not been able to tell you 3 years ago that we would be where we are today. But in my mind, there's a couple of like things that don't go away. Number one is, this is kind of goes into my philosophy for how I think about work, is number one, and this was really internalized in me, the one resource that everyone has the same amount of is time. And time is the most precious resource in the world. And if you don't use your time well, then the game is already over. If you're trying to really compete on something, you need to spend time on it. And people spend way too much time because of the way they use social media, because of the way they think other people spend time on a lot of nonsense. So I think, spend more time learning. You can do a lot more even if you just spend more time learning and asking critical questions. So that's number one, is like you can't do much unless you spend time on it. Time is the ultimate leveler. Number two, I would say the one skill that will never, or I can't say never anymore, but which will probably not go out of fashion, is the ability to make good relationships with people. And a lot of people confuse that to mean popularity or to being a socialite. No, I mean, it really is, can you meet somebody who's quite different from you, connect with them, understand them, relate to them, and grow as a result. Human connection drives almost everything in the economy, whether it's work, whether it's something else. One of my first bosses used to tell me, no one gets promoted for doing the work they're told to do. They get promoted because they do the work they're not told to do, or because their boss likes them. And people don't understand that. Most promotions happen because the boss likes you. And the boss likes you if you're likable. And so human relationships are just very important. And understanding them is extremely important to everything you do, whether it's engineering or otherwise. And then the third thing I will say is, it's kind of a mix of two things. I would say most people, skills are almost like markets. And most people chase skills that they think are in demand. By the time that you're chasing a skill that's in demand, you are late. If it's hot, if there are people online selling courses about it, you're probably not the expert in it. You're probably never going to be the expert in it. You're probably late. And there's exceptions and things like that, but it's like a stock. If you're buying Tesla at 800, it's probably not going to go more up than this from now. Versus you found Tesla at 10 when nobody was talking about it, then that's an interesting skill. And similarly, I always like to say the skills that you go to seek out should be, you should follow what you think will be valuable and what you're good at. And usually the most durable skills, especially with AI, are the very, very niche ones. There's a good quote that I really like that I read the other day, which is, AI is very impressive until you ask it something in your domain of expertise. And then you realize, 40% of the time, it's just absolute garbage. And I can still tell you, I have this discussion with my friends all the time. I can do the smartest AI possible, and I can ask them to criticize the idea of Glean. And it's never right. It just will never know. Because all of the details that went into that thought process is just not on the internet. It's not in any training data. There's nobody who can give it that training data. It's a result of just critical thought. It didn't require that much. It's not rocket science, but it required niche knowledge and critical thought over a long period of time. So ultimately, I think, education wise, you have to ground your education in math and science and critical reasoning. And then after that, I would say, drive towards the skills that you think are interesting and useful in the future, not the skills everyone is running towards right now. That's almost always the worst strategy. And so those are the three things that usually are like sort of my guiding principles. Yeah. And the last maybe caveat I'll say is look, people spend way too much time over optimizing. And I think this is especially true when I see with Indian people. They spend too much time optimizing on what they think the best thing is instead of actually doing it. And I've seen this even from school. There was always that kid in school who would be like, what is the best book to study from and what are the best things to study for the exam? Just study. Just study them all. All this time that you spend trying to find the best notes is better spent just doing it. And so I think that same lesson applies for like any skill you're picking up. Just do it. Do
Yeah.
it, and don't be afraid to make or to do something that other people aren't pursuing. In many ways, I got here by doing so many different projects that nobody told me to do. Nobody told me to write on Twitter. Nobody told me, hey, look, write this blog post on like the Indian education system in 2013, which became my first like viral online thing. No one told me. I was just thought it was interesting and I went and did it. And I think that's generally something that's an invaluable skill. Just follow your curiosity.
Yeah. Follow your curiosity and then just go do it. Is the key. And Didi, we'll switch gears here.
Yeah.
We were talking about that you do visit India, once a year, and also work-wise, you helped Google launch their office or search in Bangalore. So you've been connected to India. What's your connection to India these days professionally, and what's your take? What are you most excited about Indian technology ecosystem?
I think, my parents live in India. I identify very strongly as someone who's very Indian. If you ask me what my hobbies outside of work are, like I like Bollywood, I like cricket, I like Indian music is usually most of the music I listen to. So I'm actually, I would say quite Indian in the more conventional sense, despite having like lived in America for so long. Um, that being said, I get mistaken for this a lot online where Indians, I think, just are very patriotic people. And every time I say anything critical, I say it out of like great love for the nation. I always want India to do better, and I don't think you can do better if you're not critical. If you just constantly say how amazing you are, it's very hard to improve. I think that India has a lot of very critical problems. There's a reason why I currently don't live in India, for example. I just don't think it's the best environment for somebody like me to thrive. And I'll give you like, let me answer the question this way. One of the things that I think India has a lot of growing up to do in as a country is, especially in my field in technology, India does not contribute to global research in any significant way as a country. We don't do any core fundamental research in computer science that's relevant. Everyone in even IIT will tell you about some primality theorem that was discovered 20 years ago that has no relevancy, and that was one paper. We like to talk more about what we have done than actually go do stuff. And I think that's fundamentally missing from a research onwards level. There's a lot of very interesting startups and companies in India, but for India as a technological powerhouse to really grow, many, many things have to change. Number one, I think research, I already mentioned. Number two, I think India has to start retaining its talent, and you cannot just retain your talent by telling people stay in India. You have to make the environment one where the best people want to stay in India. And the ways to do that are, you need to build on core technology, not just building on everything else. You need really good infrastructure in the country that people actually want to come back to and can live good lives. And more importantly, I think this is a more cultural thing. I am not the expert on how this changes, but my experience working with India was that most people in India were very mercenary in nature. They work for money. They will take the next job if it pays them more. They will, and when they're working their job I can't generalize, but in many cases, they will do the minimum amount of work that it takes to like keep the job. And that culturally is a very different culture from what I've seen and observed, even amongst Indians in America. It's the same people. They'll come to America, they'll be much better at this. But in America, there's, and many other countries, I'm just using America as an example, there is a notion of like, even if nobody's looking down my shoulder, I should do a good job. It is my duty to do a good job here. It is my duty to do what is in the best interest of the people around me, not just my own. And I think culturally, a lot of those things need to evolve for India's at least tech scene to really be on the cutting edge. We've done a lot of good stuff. But I think there's still a long way to go until we can really exploit the talent that is in the nation. I mean, we have so many. The most incredible thing about India is the Indians. I think everything else needs some work. And so that's kind of how I see the country. But look, there's probably a future where I see myself come back to India later on. I do very much love the country in many ways, and so I will always seek to do my bit to make it better, even if I live here.
Yeah, got it. And Didi, if you were to take one large bet, high conviction, on the Indian technology ecosystem, it could be whether, let's say, around AI, or it could be wrappers that Indians can build, which basically could actually become so large that others would try to copy or seek inspiration or learn from them.
There's a couple. I mean, if you look at the AI ecosystem, I think there are some big bottlenecks that companies are trying to solve. Number one is data. India has maybe the widest set of talent to provide data that is both basic data and pretty advanced data in various fields. Number two is in many deployed practical AI applications, in order to get full 100% accuracy on certain tasks, you often need to have humans on the ground, especially in an enterprise setting. I'm thinking you have to have humans on the ground to make sure things are successful. India has the best supply of talent, and it's much less costly than in America. With both of these advantages, I think fundamentally they're both the same thing. India has a huge talent advantage. No other country in the world has as many people who are as smart at something, and do not cost as much as the Bay Area or most other places. And I think that's where our leverage as a nation lies internationally. And so that can mean like there's at least 20 different companies to be built out of these advantages that we're not taking advantage of to the fullest extent. And just to give you a very core example, in the Bay Area tomorrow, like let's say I am building, like very classic startup example, I am building an AI company to help replace customer support systems for enterprises. It's a classic enterprise play. It's a good startup idea because big companies don't want to do it because it's quite ineffective. Small companies can do it by accessing models everywhere and then building workflows around it. Now, as soon as that company scales, like let's say you're selling to a Boeing, you're selling to like, I don't know, Home Depot, these guys are buying your product to replace their customer service. To make it successful, you actually need to have a lot of engineers on the ground to make sure that things are working correctly. Because AI it's not deterministic. Things can go wrong. If you're a company in the valley, the cost and time it takes to hire like 5 of those engineers is at least $1 million, if not more. And it'll take you, maybe a month to hire them and find them. In India, you can find that overnight for much, much less cost. And so at a very inherent level, you have a huge business advantage in being able to deliver a better product than all of these people. And then with your own data labeling that you can also get talent for, you can then start creating either post-trained versions of big models, because I don't think India has the capital or needs the capital to train models from scratch, but you can create good post-trains of those models to actually be extremely effective in those environments. So those are the kind of ideas that I think in the space of AI that I think India could be very successful in because of inherent benefits. But again, there's no reason we can't be successful at many other types of ideas. I just think there's no inherent reason for those ideas. Then you have to just compete at a global scale, have better product, have better distribution, have better growth, which you can. It's just a little bit harder. And this one is you have more systemic advantages.
Got it. Didi, we'll move to our last section. My co-pilot in the back, I don't know if you can see him. He's the one who drives it. But he doesn't directly ask the guest. He would ask me to ask the guest. So Didi, we know you as an operator now, as an investor, and someone who thinks methodically. What do your friends know you for? Who are you outside of work?
That's a great question. It's my favorite question so far. I think very few people know this about me. outside of work, I barely talk about work. And I am a very unserious person. I like to joke around and do nothing and crack jokes and like extremely casual person. I generally sometimes I do like to debate. So I like to debate about things, but I love music, movies, just fairly basic stuff. I like to read stories. I like to read fiction a lot. But the first vibe, if you were to meet me when I was traveling and didn't know who I was, I think the first vibe you'd get is this is just a fun person who likes to enjoy life.
Mhm.
And that's what I try to be, and it's kind of my natural self. I think most people see my work persona, it's too serious. I'm not a very serious person. I think, life is short, you have to have fun. And so that's usually the person I am outside of
Yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah. Love it. And Alfonso says thank you. Uh, uh, Didi, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you for coming on the pod and just walking us through your journey so far. What an incredible journey you've had, and I'm excited for you for what's next. In the cards for you.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate it, Shiva. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.